The USS Leviathan moved through the deep with a steady hum, its hull holding back the crushing weight of the North Pacific 400 feet above. Inside, the corridors were narrow and lit by muted fluorescent strips, the air tinged with the faint metallic tang of machinery. In the auxiliary systems room, Petty Officer Third Class Isolde Thorough stood at her console, fingers gliding over switches and displays with the precision of someone who had repeated this sequence countless times. She checked secondary cooling relays, cycled backup communication arrays, and tested tertiary power couplings, her gaze lingering briefly on small fluctuations most crew would pass over. She kept her shoulders squared but leaned subtly toward the bulkhead whenever officers passed in the cramped space, allowing them to move without a word from either side. Anson Merritt strode by and muttered a quick, "Morning, Ghost," without slowing. The nickname had stuck within days of departure. Isolde neither smiled nor frowned. She simply continued the diagnostic routine, making small notations in a personal log the others did not know existed. At 0800 hours, she joined the command briefing, slipping into the back row as Captain Hargrove outlined their patrol route. An auxiliary sonar display caught her attention. She raised her hand and spoke evenly, noting unusual acoustic shadows in Grid Sector 7, which might indicate uncharted formations or submerged debris. The captain glanced her way with a blank look before turning to a lieutenant for analysis. The discussion moved on without her. 3 hours later, the chief engineer reported the same anomaly and was commended for his attention to detail. Isolde, seated alone in the auxiliary room again, entered a small checkmark beside a line in her personal notes. Her quarters reflected the same precision as her work. The bunk was perfectly made, uniforms folded in exact stacks, technical manuals aligned on the desk. Between the pages of one, tucked so it could not be seen without opening to it, was a worn photograph. The edges were softened from years of handling. She did not take it out. In the mess hall, she chose a seat at the far end, setting down a tray with unhurried motions. She ate methodically while reviewing maintenance schedules on her tablet. At the opposite end of the table, a group of junior officers laughed in the casual tones of those who felt comfortable in their place. One asked if anyone had seen the ghost today, prompting another to joke about her passing through walls. Someone claimed she had startled him in the comm room without making a sound. Their amusement was light, but dismissive. Isolde finished her meal without looking up, carried her tray to the return, and left, without a word. To the crew, she was simply a quiet technician who kept to herself. But in the soft vibration of the submarine's frame and the overlooked shadows on a sonar screen, she saw things others missed. The Leviathan moved through the deep, unaware that its most vital safeguard sat silently in its own shadows. The submarine's night cycle settled over the Leviathan with dimmed lighting and a quieter hum through the hull. Most of the crew were off watch, scattered in bunks or common spaces, but in the communications room the steady green glow of monitors lit Isolde Thorough's face. She had told the duty officer she needed to check the auxiliary repeaters, a routine responsibility no one questioned. Once his attention drifted back to a magazine, she opened a covert diagnostic channel buried deep in the system's architecture. On the screen, a sequence of encrypted data scrolled in precise patterns, nothing a casual glance would notice. She memorized the pattern in silence, then cleared the screen and performed the standard repeater check to keep the cover intact. Leaving the comms room, she stepped into a narrow corridor just as a side door opened. Admiral Cantrell, a visitor from Strategic Command, nearly walked into her. His polite apology came with a brief pause, his eyes narrowing as if recalling a half-forgotten file. The look vanished in an instant, replaced by a neutral nod. She moved on without a change in pace, but she felt the weight of that glance follow her down the passageway. By morning, the ship returned to full lighting and the rhythm of daily operations. During her systems inspection, Isolde found a flaw in the weapon's auxiliary power routing. Left unchecked, it could disable firing capability under specific conditions. Without telling anyone, She reconfigured the routing with precise keystrokes. The fix appeared nowhere in the logs. The vulnerability was simply gone. On day 47, while monitoring the communication relays, she noticed a flicker in the quantum encryption protocols. It was no more than a microscopic fluctuation, far below the threshold that would trigger an automated alert. Within 30 seconds, a similar distortion appeared in navigation. Another 30 brought it to environmental controls. Each instance repeated the same irregular pattern she had committed to memory the night before. She sat forward in her chair, scanning rapidly through secondary systems. In under 2 minutes, 17 separate subsystems showed the same anomaly. The automated safeguards registered nothing. To anyone else, the Leviathan was functioning normally. To her, it was already under attack. In the control spaces, the air carried a subtle shift, a tension without source. Crew members in the passageways moved a little faster, glancing toward bulkheads as if expecting them to vibrate. She passed 2 sailors in a junction who lowered their voices as she walked by, sensing something was wrong but unable to name it. Then, the alarms erupted, sharp and unrelenting. Red lights strobed in the corridors. The deep, resonant thrum of the engines was suddenly underscored by the shudder of system transitions. Isolde stepped into the main corridor, moving without rush as sailors bolted past towards their stations. The captain's voice came over the intercom, ordering all hands to emergency positions. In the command center, voices overlapped as cascading system failures appeared across multiple boards, weapons locked, nuclear launch systems frozen, control authority denied. On the sonar screen, 3 hostile vessel signatures emerged on a steady approach. The bridge filled with the metallic tang of recycled air thickened by human breath, the sensation of the deep pressing closer around the hull. No one yet connected the spreading failure to the faint, repeating pattern she had seen hours before, just as no one had connected her to anything beyond a quiet technician. But both would make themselves known before long, and when they did, the clock would already be running. The command center was a storm of light, sound, and motion. Console displays flickered with cascading error messages. Status boards turned red across entire systems, and the slow, rhythmic ping of sonar tracked 3 hostile contacts closing from the northeast. Captain Hargrove sat in his command chair, the symbol of authority on the Leviathan. Yet the grip of his hands on the armrests betrayed the strain. He barked override codes with clipped precision. Each was met with the same flat rejection tone from the system. Lieutenant Brooks at the weapons station tried a manual reset, his fingers flying over the keys, jaw tight. "Come on," he muttered, pressing the command again. Negative acknowledgement flashed in harsh red. On another console, the engineering officer reported that reactor safeguards were slipping offline. Battery fallback already predicted within minutes. The captain ordered emergency workarounds. The responses came in fragments. No effect. Blocked at system level. Not responding. On the tactical display, the hostile vessels crept closer, their markers advancing 1 calculated step at a time. Every few seconds, the ping of sonar hit the air like a metronome of inevitability. The voices in the room grew sharper, louder. A young crewman, tension making him reckless, blurted out, "Maybe the ghost can fix it." The awkward chuckles that followed were thin and short-lived. Heads turned toward Isolde, seated at her auxiliary station, silent and watchful. She rose without hurry, walking toward the main terminal as the countdown timer on the big screen ticked down past 8 minutes. "With respect, sir, I need to access that terminal," she said evenly. The captain's eyes narrowed. "Return to your station. Thorough. That's a direct order." The room seemed to tighten around the exchange, the noise of consoles and voices fading under the weight of the moment. The XO stepped forward, his gaze shifting between the timer, the tactical display, and the calm figure in front of him. "Captain, we have no options left. Let her try. Whatever she's thinking, it can't make this worse." For a moment, The captain didn't move. His command chair, so steady in its authority, looked suddenly like a siege position leadership pinned under forces it couldn't control. He glanced once more at the encroaching vessel markers, then back at her. "You have 2 minutes," he said finally, the words landing heavy in the charged air. Isolde gave a single nod and stepped past the weapons officer to the main terminal. Around her, the air still buzzed with muttered curses and the sharp tap of desperate keystrokes. But her movements were deliberate, her breathing steady. In a room full of noise, she was the only one entirely focused. The countdown continued its march towards 0, each second pulling the crew closer to the point where rank no longer mattered, only results. Isolde reached into her uniform and drew out something no one in the room had ever seen before. It was a small, matte black card with beveled edges, its surface broken only by faint geometric etchings and the embedded glint of a non-standard chip. The room stilled, every eye on the object in her hand. She moved to a section of the main console that appeared seamless to most, her fingers pressing on an innocuous panel until it clicked and slid open to reveal a hidden slot. Without ceremony, she slid the card home. The interface on every connected screen shifted instantly. The muted blues and grays of the Leviathan's operating system drained away, replaced by a stark ultraviolet hue pulsing softly at the edges. A new prompt appeared, its lettering sharper, the tone of its synthetic voice unmistakably different. System, voice, clearance, ultraviolet. Identity confirmation required. Murmurs broke the silence. Even the most seasoned officers had only heard whispers of ultraviolet clearance, the supposed highest level of operational authority, rumored but never confirmed. The XO's face tightened in disbelief, while the weapons officer instinctively took half a step back from the terminal. Isolde placed her palm on the scanner, her voice calm and clear. Sentinel Operative Thero, Authorization Hyperion. The system processed her identity, the ultraviolet glow intensifying in measured pulses. 3 seconds felt like 30 before the voice returned. Identity confirmed. Clearance. Ultraviolet. Recognized. The countdown timer froze at 7 minutes 22 seconds. In the same motion, she keyed a command sequence. The primary display split to reveal a secure video link, the signal quality pristine despite their depth. The view resolved into a polished, wood-paneled conference room, flags flanking the walls, and the Joint Chief seated in full uniform. At the center, the chairman leaned forward, his expression grave. Sentinel Thero, status report. Her posture shifted subtle, but unmistakable. The quiet technician's frame seemed to fill the space, her voice carrying a clipped precision. "Sir, the USS Leviathan is under quantum interference attack matching the November Sierra pattern. 3 hostile vessels closing. Configuration suggests special operations boarding capability. Phantom protocol is active. Countermeasures are in progress. No casualties." The chairman gave a curt nod. "Proceed with full authority. Sentinel, engagement parameters are transmitting now." Captain Hargrove stepped forward, his voice taut with restrained anger. "Mr. Chairman, I demand to know what is happening on my boat." The chairman's gaze shifted, his tone firm but measured. "Captain, Operative Thero is not under your command and never has been. She operates under a program established after the Brisbane incident of 2017. Her authority in this specific scenario supersedes yours. I require your full cooperation." The captain's jaw flexed as he looked from the chairman to Isolde, the shift in power undeniable. Around them, officers who had dismissed her for weeks now watched with a mixture of shock and dawning respect. The ultraviolet glow across their consoles cast an otherworldly light over the command center, a visual reminder that they were now operating under a reality layered beneath the one they thought they knew. True authority had been here all along, invisible until the moment the ship needed it most. The command center settled into a tense but functional rhythm as Isolda's hands moved across the ultraviolet interface. "Phantom protocol engaged," she announced, the console responding with a series of low chimes. Hidden systems deep within the Leviathan came alive, processors that had lain dormant. Arrays not listed in any standard schematic. On the tactical display, new icons appeared alongside the familiar sonar returns, each marking a subsystem now under her direct control. "Deploying quantum field disruptors," she said, her voice even precise. Energy signatures flared on the screen, expanding outward in controlled pulses toward the 3 hostile vessels. Within seconds, faint propulsion trails that had burned steady began to flicker and fade. The hostile subs' courses wavered, their approach vectors stuttering as if an invisible hand were pulling them off track. Captain Hargrove leaned toward the display. "I'm seeing propulsion degradation on targets 1 and 2. Target 3 is attempting evasive countermeasures," Isolda replied. "Adjusting output frequencies. Maintain pressure on the first 2. We want them immobile." The room felt different now, the earlier chaos replaced by a current of focused purpose, every officer attentive to her cadence. "Lieutenant Brooks," she called without looking up, "prepare torpedo tubes for a disabling shot on target 2. The weapons officer's earlier skepticism was gone. He moved without hesitation, signaling the crew. Hydraulic systems hummed as the tubes flooded. The metallic clunk of loading echoed faintly, followed by the hiss of pressure seals locking into place. Status lights shifted from amber to steady green. "Tube 1 ready, targeting data loaded," Brooks confirmed. Isolda made a small adjustment to the coordinates. "Use this revised solution. It will take out propulsion without compromising hull integrity. We need that vessel intact for intelligence recovery." Brooks entered the changes and gave a sharp nod. "Fire when ready," the captain ordered. The torpedo key, a weighty, old-world symbol of command, turned in its housing with a deliberate click. A muffled thump ran through the deck as compressed air launched the weapon. On the display, its track curved cleanly toward the second hostile. Moments later, a muted bloom appeared around the vessel's aft section. Its symbol shifted from hostile red to disabled gray. "Target 2 propulsion destroyed," Brooks confirmed. "Target 3 is breaking off," reported the sonar operator, retreating at flank speed. Isolda studied the tactical picture, her tone steady. "Recommend we hold position and secure the disabled vessels. Pursuit risks drawing us away from the asset we've neutralized. Capturing their technology will give us strategic advantage." Hargrove looked toward the still open secure feed. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs gave a single nod. "Follow her recommendation. Captain, support assets are en route." "Aye," Hargrove replied, turning back to his officers. "Maintain defensive posture. Marine teams on standby for boarding." The tactical display now told a different story, where 3 advancing threats had once glowed. 2 inert shapes drifted powerless in the dark, their positions marked under Leviathan's control. The crew worked in a crisp, synchronized rhythm, the earlier doubt replaced with the knowledge that they had just witnessed the fusion of capabilities they had never been trained to expect. In that moment, the symbols on the display, old Navy torpedo arcs and the new ultraviolet overlays, sat side by side, proof that unconventional and traditional power could operate as one. The lesson was clear. The surest victories came when hidden tools and established command pulled in the same direction. The command center, now steady after the counterstrike, remained unusually quiet as Captain Hargrove turned to Isolda. "I think this crew deserves to know who has been protecting them." She faced the officers and enlisted personnel who had once ignored her presence. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of authority. "What happened today is not the first time our nuclear deterrent has been targeted. In 2017, the USS Holly suffered what the record calls a training accident in the South Pacific. 94 sailors were lost. That is the official version. The truth is that a sleeper agent, surgically altered and provided perfect credentials, had served as the Holly's executive officer for over a year. When the moment came, he disabled systems and tried to seize control of nuclear launch protocols. My father, Commander James Thorough, was the weapons officer. He died stopping the breach. For a moment she was silent, her gaze level. Afterward, Naval Special Programs determined our security model could not prevent such infiltration. The Sentinel program was born. 12 operatives, each embedded across the strategic fleet under false identities, placed where they would be overlooked. We work outside the visible chain of command, intervening only when specific crisis conditions are met. The crew listened without interruption. The XO leaned forward slightly. "And you've been here, under this cover, for years." "Yes," she said. "Selection is narrow. Candidates must possess top-tier technical skill, tactical knowledge, psychological resilience, and the ability to disappear into a role indefinitely. No lasting attachments, no public record beyond the cover identity, and the capacity to accept that recognition is neither expected nor desired." She reached into her pocket and withdrew the worn photograph she kept hidden in her quarters. She handed it to the captain. The image showed her younger self in dress uniform beside her father, both smiling. "This is the last picture we took together. I carry it not for sentiment, but as a reminder of why I chose this life." Hargrove studied the photograph, his expression shifting from respect to something closer to understanding. "You've built your mission out of what you lost." "Yes, Captain," she replied. "The Sentinels were not made from theory. We are the result of lessons learned in blood. My father sacrificed himself without recognition because the record could never show what truly happened. That is the way of the program." Around the room, the crew absorbed the reality that the quiet technician they had dismissed was part of a lineage of unseen sacrifice. The photograph returned to her hand, a small but constant anchor to the life she had given up for this work. The motif was unspoken, but clear. Service measured not in medals, but in the absence of disaster. The truth hung in the air. The strongest guardians were often forged by personal loss, their skill sharpened into purpose, their lives devoted to ensuring no one else would have to make the same sacrifice. The sonar operator announced the arrival of the support fleet, his voice carrying the weight of relief. 3 Ohio-class submarines were now on station, along with the USS Jefferson and its carrier group. The tactical display shifted to a broader map, marking the support ships in green and the 2 disabled hostile vessels in flashing amber. Isolde stood at the front of the command center, the boarding schematics glowing across the main display. The schematics detailed approach vectors, breach points, and internal compartment layouts compiled from intercepted transmissions and her own extrapolation of the enemy design. The lines were clean and precise, her annotations in small, exact script. These vessels are designed for infiltration, not sustained combat. Their compartments will be heavily shielded against electronic intrusion. Our priority is recovery of their quantum interference cores before self-destruct protocols initiate. Marine boarding teams filed into the room, their body armor fitted with additional shielding plates for electronics containment. She pointed to the aft engineering sections on the schematics. Primary boarding teams will enter here and here. Secondary teams will sweep forward to the command modules. Handle all recovered components with insulated gear and keep them in shielded containment cases immediately upon removal. Any unsecured device left active risks re-engaging the attack. The captain assigned Lieutenant Commander Reynolds as liaison, and the 2 moved in lockstep through the final checks. In the well-lit prep bay, Isolde examined each containment case, running her gloved fingers along the seals before nodding. Over the open radio channel, her voice was steady and precise, confirming each stage as boarding craft departed. The camera feeds flickered to life in the command center, showing the Marines approaching through the still waters. Magnetic clamps locked their craft to the hostile hulls with dull, resonant thuds. Cutting torches flared briefly in the darkness before each breach point opened. Radio chatter filled the air compartment secure. Forward module clear. Engineering core in containment. Every report came crisp and controlled, mirroring the tone she had set in the briefing. On the tactical display, the hostile vessels shifted from amber to solid green, indicating full control. The recovered devices, dark and silent within their shielded cases, were carried back to the Leviathan under armed escort. She watched the feed until each case was secured in the carrier's isolation vault. Around her, the crew who had once looked through her now tracked her movements with quiet attention. Where there had been smirks or dismissive glances, there was only measured respect. No one spoke the word ghost now, but it hung unspoken as a memory, transformed from insult into something closer to honor. The boarding schematics she had drawn remained pinned to the tactical board, the physical map of a victory that did not come from spectacle but from silent, exacting control. The recovered enemy technology was tangible proof of an unseen war, one fought not in public view but in the deep, where recognition never reached. As the last confirmation came in over the radio, Isolde allowed herself the smallest exhale. Survival was one measure of victory, but this was another. The enemy had sought to take control of the Leviathan and its arsenal. Instead, the submarine sailed with its crew intact, its defenses restored, and the enemy's most guarded technology secured in Allied hands. Quietly, without celebration, she returned to her station. The work was not done. The USS Leviathan eased into her berth at Naval Base Kitsap under a pale dawn sky. The air carried the briny tang of the inlet, laced with diesel fumes from nearby tugs. Gulls wheeled overhead, their calls cutting through the low rumble of engines and the occasional mournful blast of a ship's horn somewhere out in the channel. Crews stood at their posts, the last moments of deployment ticking down in quiet ritual. As tradition dictated, Captain Hargrove was first to step onto the pier, but instead of walking on toward the waiting cluster of senior officers, he turned and stood at attention beside the gangway. The executive officer joined him. Then, one by one, every officer in succession. By the time Petty Officer 3rd Class Isolde Thorough emerged from the hatch, the full command crew was formed in a silent line of honor. She wore the same technician's uniform she had on the day she boarded, her hair neat, her expression calm, no insignia beyond what her cover allowed. As she reached the captain, he brought his hand up in a crisp salute. "Commander Thorough," he said, voice steady, but low enough that only those nearest could hear. "On behalf of the crew of the Leviathan, thank you for your service." She returned the salute without hesitation. "The honor was mine, Captain." She walked the length of the line, each sailor saluting in turn. Their faces were different now. The wariness, the dismissive glances, the half-smiles of condescension were gone. In their place was a quiet respect, a recognition that needed no words. By the time she stepped onto the pier, the ceremony was already fading back into the rhythm of base operations. Near the end of the dock, a woman in civilian clothes stood by a nondescript sedan. She held no clipboard, no badge, but the way she waited was unmistakable. Without speaking, Isolde handed over her identification card. The woman passed her a sealed envelope in return. Inside were new documents, a fresh name, and orders to report to her next assignment. The exchange was over in seconds, as if it had never happened. She slid into the back seat, the car pulling away into the tangle of base roads without attracting notice. 6 weeks later, at Naval Submarine Base, New London, the USS Nemesis was making ready for patrol. A new technician reported for duty, Petty Officer 3rd Class Astrid Volilov, according to her file. She moved through the narrow passageways with the unassuming air of someone used to staying out of the way. Her assigned quarters were bare, but for the neatly made bunk, the regulation uniforms stacked with precision, and a single technical manual placed squarely at the center of the desk. She opened the manual and, as she had done many times before, slid a worn photograph between its pages, a younger self in dress blues beside a man in a commander's uniform, both smiling. She closed the book, set it in place, and let her gaze rest on it for a moment before turning away. Duty was a constant, and so was anonymity. The names changed, the hull numbers changed, but the mission remained. Somewhere out there, another crisis would come, and another ghost would be needed to meet it. On the Nemesis, as on the Leviathan, she would walk unseen through the tight corridors, hear the easy laughter of those who had no idea, and be ready when the moment came.